Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is if your natal sun either squares or opposes Neptune. These are both hard angles, and because they're similar in how they will manifest, I'm including them in one video. I want to give a shout out to cafeastrology.com for providing information that I am going to be using in this reading. However, I do add my own insights and I paraphrase, so I don't want you to think that everything that I'm saying is what they necessarily meant, okay? So the sun is our sense of self. And it's important to note that ultimately, if you think about it, our sense of self should never be determined by anything that happens in this lifetime. I mean, your sun sign might be Scorpio, but your soul is not a Scorpio individual. So you might be a lawyer, but your soul isn't a lawyer. These are temporary designations. And so, some people, they identify so strongly with something that they have a hard time when they retire to accept that they are no longer that thing, or if they are a parent, when their children fly the coop and they're experiencing empty nest syndrome. You can't go to a dinner party and somebody asks you what you do, and let's say you are raising children and that was your job for 20 years, and you say, well, I'm a mother. And they said, oh, really? Well, how old are your children? Well, one of my children's 35 and the other one is 29. And then they might stare at you and go, well, how are you calling yourself a mother when your children are old enough to have kids themselves? And that truly is how you view yourself. But that just shows that, these roles that we play, or that we fill, are meant to be for a season. But we do live in this world, so the sun can represent those things that we identify as. And I think it's especially as it relates to work, career, but also core personality traits too. When Neptune is the spiritual influence, it does get a bad rap because some of the challenging aspects to Neptune can be delusion. So with the sun, it's like self-delusion with these hard angles. It can be escapism, addiction, insanity in some cases. And so when somebody has this square or this opposition, they can have a very hard time with ordinary life and being an ordinary person. So being someone who bags groceries can be, absolutely unacceptable, because in their mind, they have this whole dream of who they are. They can daydream with the best of them and imagine themselves in these grandiose ways. And you can even look to see if your sun forms a hard angle with Jupiter, and that could be delusions of grandeur. And when somebody is like that, they're going to have a hard time being able to be happy being in a job that doesn't seem like something very special. So something being special, being out of the ordinary, is very important. This is why if you have artistic talent, it would be really wise to develop that, because that would probably be the best type of career for somebody like you, because something very mundane like accounting and stuff like that would be probably hell for somebody who has such an idealistic attitude. When people with these angles are young, they may not have had a father who was a strong person. The father can be weak. The sun represents the father. And Neptune can represent a kind of weakness, a deception, or an addictive nature, maybe a mental illness that the father had. And the other thing that can come about with these hard angles is that the individual sees their father in this idealistic light. And sometimes, this also happens when the sun is in the 12th house, because the 12th house is ruled by Neptune. And the father may be in prison, but they're telling the child that he is in the military and he's a hero, or something that is a lie. Neptune can be lies about the father. But sometimes a person doesn't have to have somebody tell them lies. They can create them themselves. And really, these kinds of things, when it relates to Neptune, are I think that they are self-protective devices, that the psychological defenses that the mind uses in order to keep the child, because a lot of times this is going to stem from childhood, from feeling bad. And also, if we transcend the concept of the actual father and we just look at it as the sun as some kind of authority, or what would we call it, like guidance, there may have been a lack of that when the child was growing up, because Neptune can kind of distort things and make it muddled. There's a cloudiness, a muddiness. So a child who grows up like this doesn't have a strong family backbone. And so they may be left to kind of fend for themselves. And that can also contribute to a lack of vision for one's life, because if you don't have anybody that is, letting you know that they care about your dreams and your goals, sometimes it's hard for a child or a teenager to do that for themselves, to be their own advocate. And so in trying to define oneself, Cafe Astrology mentions, falling in with the wrong crowd. They said and that certainly is the case. When some young people are teenagers, some of them are more susceptible than others to peer pressure. And there's often this theory that it's because sometimes it can be like a substitute family, like kids who join gangs, for instance, that they're looking for this kind of surrogate family. And in gangs, they have a hierarchy too, so they might have a leader, and that person kind of tells this individual what to do, and that's like the authority figure. So there's always somebody who takes the place of a parent, for instance. And this can lead to somebody who has a hard angle here, growing up being particularly susceptible to males who are, takers, or, users who want to take advantage of this individual. So, like a heterosexual woman could find herself attracted to men who are users, instead of being like an equal to her and it's like a give and take adult relationship. It could be that she's almost like parenting this man. And because it's like she's reliving that relationship she had growing up where she didn't have a strong role model or the archetypal father figure who's the protector and whatnot. And for men, just what I was saying, I was using gangs as an example, that hypermasculinity of trying to find the what it means to be a man when the boy doesn't have that strong father. When I say strong, obviously I'm not saying whether he lifts weights. I'm talking about his moral character. And if and just his general way that he lives life. And if the boy doesn't have that to look up to, then he may look for it in other males, and maybe older males who are not flying right, and he gets in with the wrong crowd. So these are kind of the things that can happen with this with these aspects. And the talking about that desire to be larger than life, like kind of legends in their own mind, if you will. And I'm kind of mixing it up a little bit with Jupiter, but I mean, it's that fantasy version of themselves. This can lead such people to do things that are forms of escapism. And what they mention here are having affairs and also drug taking, although alcohol would certainly be a part of that. But the flip side of that too is that I think for some people who, let's say they do get married and they're not cheating, if they don't know themselves and they realize, they wake up one day and they see that they are in this terrible marriage, or they're working in a job where they don't resonate with. Maybe they even majored in this thing in college that they had no real interest in because they were trying to please someone or whatever. I think they can still do those escapist, behaviors, because their reality is other than what they've wanted, because they didn't know who they were. So it can work both ways. Either they're trying to pretend to be somebody special by being under the influence of a drug, and then they can live this fantasy life, or having affairs where they can feel important in that sneaking around, and they feel very wanted, but they're really just being used sometimes. It can work either way, but the bottom line is that the person doesn't know who they are, and that leads them to escapist behaviors. And one of the main things that I think is going on here that's a liability is that there's a fragility with their sense of self. And that makes it even more difficult to have disappointments, to have situations where they have, as they say in Cafe Astrology, have a blow to their ego. Because, and what I was thinking of is in one of the early years of American Idol, and American Idol now has been around for about 20 years. But way back when, I remember that there was a season where they had like a special show of all these people who were delusional, who auditioned, and then they had like Simon Cowell and everything saying these snarky things to them, And I'm sure a lot of you know what I'm talking about because they did have it on YouTube. They do have it on YouTube. And I mean, it's kind of funny, but it's sad at the same time because some of these people, are crazy and even mentally disabled. And somebody told them that they could sing. I don't know who, but that's the thing. Some people do not know who they are. They don't know what their talents are, and they don't know what their weaknesses are. And so these kinds of people can go and do things that they have no real talent in. And in their mind, in their fantasies, they think that they are these amazing, talented people in this particular area of life. If they were to actually get in touch with their talent and find out what it is, their true self, then they would know what their talents are. But because they're kind of like, to me, it's almost like living on the surface of life in a sense where you're just kind of seeing what other people admire and trying to be like that and not even really tuning into the self. And I don't think that I wouldn't call people with these hard angles superficial necessarily, only when it comes to their own self-discovery. They may be quite deep in other areas, and if you have one of these combinations, I really feel like you can, if you can integrate some of the differing parts that are like the part of yourself that wants to deny reality and the part of yourself that doesn't feel like you know who you are, and you can transcend those things in a very conscious way. It can almost be like the sun in conjunction with Neptune, where the person isn't concerned about their identity. It's more like a spiritual kind of a way of approaching life, where the person transcends the personal identity for the bigger picture for all of humanity. And the little self with the small s is traded in favor of the self with the capital S, which is the true self, and which doesn't have a particular profession or any of these outer trappings. I think that's all I want to say. The other thing I wanted to kind of differentiate is between the square and the opposition. The only thing I would say, because they're going to be very similar in some of the themes that I mentioned, the square can be frustrating, like you're trying to get over this and you find that you're just constantly blocked. And this can be because both parts want to have control. The sun part is the worldly part that wants to have recognition and all of that stuff, and maybe is in the ego. And the Neptune part is the part that doesn't want to be in the world, that wants to escape, that wants to live in a fantasy, that doesn't want to draw attention to itself necessarily. So that could be kind of what keeps you from expressing this in a harmonious way. The opposition to me is about relationships, is about projecting certain qualities onto other people that really are a part of yourself, or that idealism, looking for father figures, looking and projecting that onto different people, onto bosses. And sometimes if there's some kind of negative outcome, then you can blame that person. It's all their fault that the relationship didn't turn out as it should have, even though if you had really been honest with yourself, you would have known that that person wasn't right for you, that they were an alcoholic, or that they couldn't keep a job, and you acted like everything was perfect when it never was. So the projection a lot of times is refusing to see the individual's part in all of that and all of what is going on, but also it's the blame game. It's like, this is your responsibility, this is your fault, instead of taking responsibility themselves for what they brought to the situation. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there. I feel like I'm forgetting something, but it's all good. I hope that you enjoyed this. Oh, well, they did mention in Cafe Astrology famous people who have a hard aspect to Neptune. Squares: Angelica Houston, Jennifer Aniston, Kevin Costner, Cameron Diaz. Oppositions: Sheena Easton. Well, those are all successful people, so if you have either one of these, don't think that you're doomed, not by a long shot. Knowledge is power, don't forget that. Okay, if you would like a personal reading, I have deep dive readings, which are double readings, and they are 2 hours in length, 1 hour for chart analysis, and 1 hour for the transits that are coming up. Some of the important transits for the upcoming 12 months. That's called my deep dive reading, and I have other readings. That's a special price because it's like you're actually purchasing 2 readings in one. But I do have other readings as well, and I'm at rainandmoonastrology.com. The link is below. Take care. Bye.